May 17, 1942, Tanforan Assembly Center, San Bruno, California. The morning air carried the acrid smell of disinfectant, mixed with hay dust from the converted horse stalls. Dr. Kazue Togasaki pressed her stethoscope against the swollen belly of a young Japanese-American woman lying on a makeshift examination table fashioned from wooden crates. Through the thin barracks walls, she could hear the murmur of 10,000 voices. Families crammed into spaces meant for livestock, children crying, elderly men coughing in the damp California air. The woman beneath her hands was barely 19, her face etched with fear and exhaustion. In just 4 months, this Stanford-educated physician had gone from running a thriving medical practice in downtown San Francisco to delivering babies in a former racetrack, surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. Yet as Dr. Togasaki placed her weathered hands on the expectant mother's abdomen, feeling the child shift within, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Something that would reveal the true power of compassion in humanity's darkest hour. This is the story of how one woman's unwavering dedication to healing would transform despair into hope, and how the simple act of bringing life into the world would become an act of quiet revolution against a system designed to dehumanize. The events that led to this moment began not with Pearl Harbor, but decades earlier, when a 9-year-old girl named Kazue survived the Great San Francisco earthquake of 1906. As buildings crumbled and fires raged across the city, young Kazue watched her mother transform their local church into a makeshift hospital. Night after night, she helped her mother tend to the wounded, translating between non-English-speaking Japanese immigrants and overwhelmed American doctors. Those early lessons in healing would prove prophetic, teaching her that medicine knew no boundaries of race or nationality, that suffering was universal, and that the human capacity for care could transcend any barrier. By 1942, Dr. Kazue Togasaki had already shattered multiple barriers. She was one of the first 2 Japanese-American women to earn a medical degree in the United States. Graduating from Women's Medical College in Philadelphia in 1933 after being repeatedly rejected by nursing programs simply because of her ethnicity. Hospital administrators had told her plainly that they didn't use Japanese nurses because the staff wouldn't have it. So she had done what seemed impossible. She had earned the one degree that would be harder to ignore. For nearly a decade, she had built a successful practice in San Francisco's Japantown, delivering babies and treating families who trusted her not just as a physician, but as someone who understood their cultural needs, their fears, their hopes for their American-born children. She had purchased a home, established herself as a pillar of the community, and finally felt she had achieved the American dream her immigrant parents had sacrificed so much to pursue. Then came December 7, 1941. Within hours of Pearl Harbor, FBI agents began sweeping through Japanese-American communities, arresting businessmen, Buddhist priests, and community leaders. By February 1942, President Roosevelt had signed Executive Order 9066, authorizing the military to remove any person of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast. Dr. Togasaki, like 120,000 other Japanese Americans, 2/3 of them American citizens, received a notice giving her less than 2 weeks to report to a bus station with no more than 2 suitcases. Everything else would be left behind. What the government expected was compliance, resignation, perhaps even gratitude for the protection they claimed the camps would provide. What they did not expect was Dr. Kazue Togasaki. As the bus pulled away from San Francisco on that spring morning, carrying her toward an uncertain future, Dr. Togasaki carried with her something more valuable than the few possessions she was allowed to pack. 40 years of medical knowledge, an unshakable commitment to healing, and a small black medical bag that would soon become a symbol of hope in the most unlikely of places. The Tanforan Assembly Center was a hastily converted racetrack where thousands of Japanese Americans were housed in horse stalls while permanent camps were being constructed. The stalls, still reeking of manure despite hurried whitewashing, measured roughly 9 by 20 feet, spaces now expected to house entire families. There were no private bathrooms, no kitchens, no medical facilities beyond a small, understaffed infirmary that was woefully inadequate for the population it served. But Dr. Togasaki saw something different when she looked around those cramped quarters. She saw pregnant women who would need skilled care during delivery. She saw elderly internees whose chronic conditions would worsen without proper treatment. She saw children who would fall ill in the overcrowded, unsanitary conditions, and she saw an opportunity to serve her community in ways that transcended the barbed wire surrounding them. Within days of her arrival, Dr. Togasaki had done what military planners had never anticipated. She had begun organizing. She sought out the other medical professionals among the internees, 2 nurses and another doctor, all younger and less experienced than herself. Together, they established what amounted to an underground medical network, treating illness and injury with whatever supplies they could scrape together or request from the inadequate camp medical facility. Word spread quickly through the camps. Grapevine, there was a real doctor in Block 13, a woman who could help when the official camp medical staff was overwhelmed or unavailable. Families began seeking her out, not just for treatment, but for something equally precious: the comfort of being cared for by someone who understood their language, their customs, and their fears. The true test of Dr. Togasaki's resolve came with her first delivery in the camp. The expectant mother was barely 18, terrified and alone. Her husband had been arrested by the FBI months earlier and sent to a Department of Justice internment camp in New Mexico. As labor pains intensified in the converted horse stall that served as her family's apartment, the young woman faced the prospect of bringing her child into a world of uncertainty and confinement. Dr. Togasaki worked by the light of a single bare bulb, her experienced hands guiding new life into existence while guard towers loomed in the darkness beyond the barracks walls. As the baby's first cry pierced the night air, something profound happened. Not just the birth of a child, but the birth of hope itself. In that moment, surrounded by the detritus of humanity's capacity for cruelty, the fundamental power of creation asserted itself. This was not the sterile, well-equipped delivery room of her San Francisco practice. There were no medical residents to assist, no modern equipment, no guarantee that complications could be handled. Yet Dr. Togasaki's steady presence, her gentle words of encouragement in both Japanese and English, her skilled hands that had delivered thousands of babies in better circumstances, all of this created a bubble of safety and dignity in a place designed to strip away both. The young mother, holding her newborn son in her arms, looked up at Dr. Togasaki with tears streaming down her face. "Arigato gozaimasu," she whispered. "Thank you." But it was more than gratitude for a successful delivery. It was recognition that someone had refused to let the circumstances diminish her humanity. That even here, behind barbed wire, life would be honored and protected. This scene would repeat itself 50 times during Dr. Togasaki's month at Tanforan. 50 babies brought into the world by a physician who had every reason to despair, yet chose instead to affirm life's value through her actions. Each delivery became an act of quiet resistance against a system that sought to reduce human beings to numbers and security threats. Government officials who designed the internment system had calculated for housing, food distribution, and security concerns. They had not calculated for Dr. Kazue Togasaki. They had not anticipated that among the people they sought to control and contain was a woman whose medical expertise and fierce compassion would transform their camps into communities, their security risks into families deserving of care and dignity. What they discovered was that their prisoners possessed something that could not be confined. the irrepressible human impulse to care for one another. In Dr. Togasaki's makeshift clinic, constructed from determination and medical supplies begged from camp administrators, the artificial distinctions between loyal and disloyal Americans dissolved. There was only doctor and patient, healer and wounded, one human being reaching out to help another. The symbolic power of those deliveries extended far beyond the medical act itself. Each baby born in the camps represented a profound statement of faith in the future, a declaration that despite present circumstances, life would continue, families would endure, and hope would survive. The parents who brought children into the world behind barbed wire were making perhaps the ultimate assertion of their belief in America's founding promises. Even as those promises had been broken, Dr. Togasaki understood this symbolism intimately. As she guided each child from darkness into light, she was participating in something larger than obstetrics. She was affirming the continuity of the Japanese-American community, ensuring that a new generation would emerge from this dark chapter with the knowledge that they had been welcomed into the world with skill, care, and love. The stethoscope became her constant companion, passed from one expectant mother to another like a token of hope. In a place where personal possessions were severely limited, where privacy was non-existent, and where dignity was under constant assault, that simple medical instrument represented something precious: the persistence of professional standards, the continuance of healing traditions, and the unbroken chain of care that connected these mothers to the broader human community. After a month at Tanforan, Dr. Togasaki was transferred to the Stockton Assembly Center, then to a succession of permanent relocation camps: Tula Lake, Poston, Manzanar, and Topaz. At each location, the pattern repeated. She would arrive, assess the medical needs, organize available resources, and begin the work of healing. Camp administrators, initially suspicious of her activities, gradually came to depend on her expertise as they realized that her presence significantly reduced the burden on their inadequate medical facilities. But the true measure of Dr. Togasaki's impact was not found in administrative reports or medical statistics. It was found in the quiet moments of human connection that occurred in her makeshift clinics. The elderly Issei man, whose diabetes she managed with careful attention to diet and limited medication. The pregnant teenager, whose fear she soothed with gentle explanations in her native language. The young mother struggling with postpartum depression, who found comfort in talking to someone who understood the particular challenges of raising children in captivity. What the internees experienced in Dr. Togasaki's care was something the camp system was not designed to provide: recognition of their full humanity. When she examined a patient, she saw not a security risk or an enemy alien, but a person deserving of the best medical care she could provide under the circumstances. When she delivered a baby, she celebrated the miracle of new life, rather than lamenting the conditions into which that life had been born. This insistence on maintaining professional standards and human dignity in the most dehumanizing circumstances became a form of quiet revolution. Every competent diagnosis, every successful delivery, every moment of compassionate care was a small act of resistance against the logic of mass incarceration. Dr. Togasaki was demonstrating through her actions that the people behind the barbed wire were not the enemy. They were Americans whose skills, knowledge, and capacity for service had been temporarily suppressed but never eliminated. The government had expected the camps to be holding facilities where potential security threats could be contained until the war's end. What they got instead were communities where teachers continued to educate, artists continued to create, and doctors continued to heal. Dr. Togasaki's medical practice became one of many examples of how the internees refused to let their circumstances define their contributions to American society. By the time Dr. Togasaki was finally released from the camps in late 1943, she had delivered hundreds of babies and treated thousands of patients across multiple facilities. She returned to San Francisco to find her home ransacked, her practice destroyed, and her former life in ruins. Yet she faced this devastation with the same quiet determination that had characterized her work in the camps. Within months, she had re-established her medical practice, specializing now in obstetrics, to serve the particular needs of Japanese-American women who sought care from someone who understood both their medical and cultural requirements. The babies born during those dark years in the camps grew up to become teachers, doctors, engineers, and artists. They became Americans in the fullest sense of the word, contributing to their communities and their country in ways that vindicated their parents' faith in the future. Many carried with them the knowledge that their first breath had been drawn under the care of a remarkable woman who had refused to let circumstances diminish her commitment to healing. Dr. Togasaki continued practicing medicine until she was 75 years old, delivering more than 10,000 babies over the course of her career. She never married, dedicating her life entirely to her profession and her community. In 1970, the San Francisco Examiner named her one of the city's most distinguished women. When she died in 1992 at the age of 95, she was mourned not just as a pioneering physician, but as a symbol of resilience and service. The stethoscope that had traveled with her from camp to camp, that had monitored the heartbeats of mothers and babies in the most unlikely of circumstances, had become something more than a medical instrument. It had become a testament to the power of human compassion to transcend the boundaries imposed by fear, prejudice, and war. In Dr. Togasaki's hands, it had been a tool not just for diagnosis, but for affirmation, a way of saying to each patient that their health mattered, their lives had value, and their humanity would be recognized and honored. The story of Dr. Kazue Togasaki and the babies born in America's concentration camps reveals a profound truth about the nature of freedom and democracy. True liberty is not simply the absence of physical restraint. It is the presence of human dignity, the recognition of individual worth, and the commitment to care for one another regardless of circumstances. In the darkest chapter of Japanese-American history, when constitutional protections failed and democratic institutions sanctioned mass imprisonment, these values survived in the hands of healers like Dr. Togasaki. The camps were designed to break spirits, to reduce proud Americans to numbers and security classifications. Instead, they became unexpected laboratories of human resilience, places where the fundamental values of American democracy, equality, dignity, and mutual care were kept alive by people who had every reason to abandon them. Dr. Togasaki's FIT stethoscope, monitoring the heartbeats of the unborn in horse stalls and converted barracks, became an instrument of democratic faith, measuring not just medical vital signs, but the vital signs of America's conscience. In the end, the true victory belonged not to those who built the camps, but to those who built communities within them. Not to those who saw security threats, but to those who saw neighbors in need of care. Not to those who sought to divide Americans into categories of loyalty and suspicion, but to those who recognize that healing knows no boundaries of race, religion, or national origin. The echo of those first cries, 50 babies born in Tanforan Assembly Center under Dr. Togasaki's care, carries forward as a reminder that even in humanity's darkest hours, the impulse to nurture and protect endures. In every successful delivery, in every life saved, in every moment of compassionate care provided under impossible circumstances, we hear the heartbeat of democracy itself, steady, persistent, and ultimately unbreakable. That stethoscope, worn smooth by decades of service, had measured more than pulse rates and fetal heartbeats. It had measured the pulse of a community under siege, the heartbeat of hope itself, and the vital signs of American values that proved stronger than barbed wire, more enduring than fear, and more powerful than the forces that sought to divide us. In Dr. Kazue Togasaki's hands, it had become an instrument of liberation, not from physical confinement, but from the spiritual imprisonment of hatred and despair. The babies she delivered grew up to become full participants in American life, their first breaths drawn in captivity, but their lives lived in freedom. They stand as living proof that democracy's promise, though sometimes betrayed, can never be permanently broken as long as there are those willing to affirm human dignity with their actions, to heal rather than harm, and to choose hope over despair in the face of seemingly insurmountable darkness.